Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's nice to see some friendly faces I know and some new faces of folks I have never met. Thank you for attending today's CFE community chat. This is I believe, our 15th chat since April and our fifth one of the fall engagement series. So this is something we started doing when COVID hit, and it kind of took off and took on a life of its own, and it's been so wonderful. And we're just delighted to have the Notebaert Museum educators here today with us for the second session, and they have a 3-part series going on through our community chat series, so it's great to have them here. We know how exhausted and incredibly busy you all are every day, especially now leading up to Thanksgiving and with the new announcements coming from the district. We just know there's so much stress and so much challenge around every single day for all of you. And we're just so thankful and happy that you chose to spend some time with us this afternoon. So for those of you new to CFE, I'm Sarah Hoppy-Knight. I'm the co-executive director of the organization. We're a Chicago-based education nonprofit. We've been around for more than 35 years. Almost 37 actually, supporting and funding CPS educators so that they can best serve their students and grow in their profession. In a typical school year, we award about 400 grants to CPS pre-K through 12th grade educators. So obviously not a typical year, but that is sort of who we are in a nutshell. A couple of quick notes before we get started. Please mute your microphones during the meeting. If you have questions during the presentation, just pop them in the chat box. We're happy to answer questions, or our presenters will be happy to answer questions as we go through the presentation today. And then there'll also be a dedicated Q&A portion at the end. So we'll kind of manage it as we go. The session is being recorded, so all of our community chats are recorded, and they're all posted along with the PowerPoint deck, the slide deck presentation, and any associated resources on our website within the next couple of days. So if you go, and Kayla will provide, if she hasn't already, the link directly to our resource roundup. All of our community chats that we've had in the past since April are cataloged there. This one will be added to it within the next couple of days. Also, just keep an eye out in the chat box for some helpful messages, like the one you just saw from Kayla, sent by Kayla and Jamila, who are my team members who are with me today. So let's get into it. Each year, the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum educators provide more contact hours of science teaching and learning support than any other museum in the city. They reach over 50,000 students and 1,500 teachers using living and preserved collections, as well as the Nature Museum's conservation work. Through both in-school and out-of-school time opportunities for Chicago students and teachers, museum educators impact the community by building knowledge, skills, interest, and enthusiasm for STEM topics. Museum education programs are founded in an inquiry-based approach to connecting our audiences to local nature and science concepts. So with that, we have 3 phenomenal presenters with us today, and I will just turn it over to them. They will introduce themselves.
Great. My name is Anna Schlecht, and I'm the School Partnerships Manager at the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum. So getting to work with a lot of whole school partnerships across the city of Chicago, working with students and teachers alike, and also collaborating with administrators to match school goals to our resources. So thanks for being here tonight, and I'll pass the torch to Yukako.
Hi, my name is Yukako Kawakatsu, and I'm one of the education programs coordinators. That just means that I work across many of our programs, both with students and teachers like you.
Hi there, I'm Nicole Juppe, also education program coordinator and one of our camp directors at the Nature Museum. So again, like Yukako and Anna, that means that we work directly with students and with teachers. And in a typical year, my summer is dominated by a summer camp.
All right, so in just a moment, Yukako will share her screen and we can all follow along there together. All right, great. So you can go ahead and hop to the next one, Yukako, thanks. Great. So we've already kind of had a chance to do some introductions here, but just wanted to lay out a little bit more about our time together tonight. So looking at our agenda, we'll be doing a brief introduction to the education department more specifically and the work that we're doing across the city. And then we'll be looking at using science as the gateway for interdisciplinary learning, which will be our key focus of the evening. And then sharing a little bit of teacher voice and resources that we have to really connect all these things together. All right. We already mentioned some tips for success here. We really do invite you to turn on your videos and cameras if you're feeling like that's the right fit for you tonight, just so we can all see and share with each other that way. If not, that's totally fine, staying on mute, but also feeling like there'll be some opportunities for us to share and collaborate by unmuting. Feel free to add in the chat. We would love to hear from you a few different times tonight. So thank you. All right. So for those of you who attended our first chat in this series of 3, some of this will be a little familiar to you, but just wanted to reground in who we are as an institution and taking a quick look at our aerial map. So if we were all able to meet in person, this is one of the spaces that we might be doing that is at our museum itself. So this is in the beautiful summer months when everything's green and lush, and we know now things are starting to get a little brown, but there's still always some life that's happening around the museum. And I can imagine in your backyards or alleyways, things near you, that's something we really prioritize at our museum, is highlighting local ecology and nature topics. So here's just a peek of our formal space, but of course nature exists outside of this museum as well. All right. We thought we could just take a moment, knowing that we're coming from some busy days, to do a quick mindful moment. So taking maybe some deep breaths, relaxing, sitting in your seat and getting comfortable. And I think our video might be kind of taking us on a journey here, but let's see. Yukako, do you mind restarting it? Maybe it'll kind of groove along, and I'll just let you watch without my voice accompanying it this time. Thanks. All right. This is kind of a mindful moment remix there. But as you can imagine, if we were walking along the nature trails together outside the museum, you might be hearing some of those different animal sounds, insect sounds. And so just taking a moment to ground there before we continue on. All right. So mentioning a few different components of our mission earlier on, but just wanted to say again that the work that we're doing at our museum, I think, aligns really well with a lot of the work that you're probably doing in your classrooms and learning environments. And so we really hope to facilitate and create a positive relationship between people and nature. We have the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of different organizations like CFE. And so that really helps us out to be able to have this citywide and really inclusive perspective on teaching and learning. So we also have a lot of great collections and exhibits and research that happens directly in our museum and out in the field. And so we're glad to be able to talk a little bit more about how this mission can filter its way into the classrooms. Right. And so when we're thinking about our approach a little bit more specifically, we think about these 4 different points to our museum's learning approach. So using real things whenever we have that opportunity. We know you're probably doing that as much as you can, and in the virtual space it might be looking a little bit different. So the way we've been chatting about it is taking this hands-on inquiry-based approach, and maybe we don't have the hands-on as much right now, but we're still using real objects whenever possible. Maybe we're looking at real photos, things like that, just to facilitate that real world phenomena-based connection. fun. When we think of learning ecosystems, we really like that term in a lot of ways, ecosystems, thinking about our environments, but also something like what we're a part of tonight. So we can think of in and out of school learning, connecting to one another and learning together whenever possible. And then student-centered instruction, of course, keeping students in the driver's seat, so to speak, of the learning. And then whole child learning. So being sure that we're incorporating social emotional experiences, keeping the student in the forefront. All right. So I mentioned earlier that we'll be focusing on interdisciplinary connections to nature and science and how we can see these really blending across the disciplines. And so you'll notice that there's a big circle around all the other circles, which we've named our SEL connection or SEL circle there. So thinking about how social emotional learning can be seen in all the disciplines, and it really is that big bubble where they're all existing. We also are going to be chatting a little bit about art tonight and how that overlaps with science, but also thinking about math and ELA, of course, knowing that that's typically a really big priority in schools. Right. So without further ado, we're going to be introducing a phenomena that we'll focus on, and I'll hand it over to Yukako.
Awesome, thanks, Anna. Yeah, so like Anna said, we're going to be using a local phenomenon together today to think about interdisciplinary learning. So today our phenomenon is about this plant called buckthorn. Some of you may be familiar with it, and if you're not, you will be. So this is a map of Cook County, and you'll see these red dots. They're approximately where buckthorn was incorporated into some urban landscaping. And now it's found all over, and you see all these crazy red arrows pointing everywhere. And particularly buckthorn is found in the Chicago forest preserves. Here's some other images to support, right, this idea. So originally in this upper left here, buckthorn was used as an ornamental plant to make these little neat hedges. And then now they're growing all over in the Chicago Forest Preserve. So this phenomenon we're investigating today is how did the common buckthorn end up in the Chicago Forest Preserves? We wanted to tie some of our museum activities into this phenomenon. So these photos are from our Nature Museum Teens program, which is the teenagers exploring and explaining nature and science. And they're actually taking part in some restoration work in the forest preserves. And you can see them working really hard to actually take down some of the buckthorn there. And so this would be a great opportunity to chime into the chat. We can have our student hats on or our teacher hats on. What are some questions you have, or what other information might be helpful to figure out how buckthorn got into the Chicago Forest Preserves? Any and all ideas welcome. Any ideas? Well, I might be a beginner level Zoom user. So if I'm not seeing something, Anna and Nicole, feel free to chime in. Great. Taking a closer look at the phenomenon and thinking a little bit about the plants in the area might be one way that you start investigating this phenomenon with your students. So because we're in this virtual learning space right now, images are one way that you could present some ideas about this phenomenon. So here we have some different pictures of the kinds of plants that you might find in the Chicago Forest Preserve. At a younger grade band, this might look like sorting the plants into different categories, and that might help students notice the different kinds of plants that are in an area. With an older group of students, you might do some biodiversity sampling. So they might count the different kinds of plants that they notice there. And then they could do some analyzing of data by making a graph like this. So tying in some of our math ideas here. And sampling has lots of different ways that you could use it to study the phenomenon. So you could have students sample the same place over a different period of time to notice how the biodiversity of plants might change over time. So maybe looking at before the buckthorn got to the Chicago Forest Preserves, and then how many of years after, thinking about how the plant composition in that area changes. You could also do sampling as an activity where students sample the biodiversity in many different places at one time to generate a map that might look like this, where students are noticing that buckthorn is found in some places in Illinois, but not all places in Illinois, and do some mapping as an extension of the sampling that they are doing. And students here, right, would think a little bit about maybe why is it found in certain places but not others, or think about how widely it's distributed. You could also look at maps over time to look at some interesting ideas about the buckthorn phenomenon.
Great, and I noticed some of you put some questions that we might be able to answer in that portion Yukako did. Our students might be able to answer some of those questions about introduction by studying that first map that shows it was originally introduced as this ornamental, so it was in these tidy rows, and then now our phenomenon is how did it get everywhere if it wasn't planted in all these forest preserves in Illinois. So some of those questions like who brought it here, where did it come from, studying maps or one of these sampling activities could start to unpack the beginning of the phenomenon for sure. But next, we wanted to kind of layer in another little piece of content, right? I noticed some of you wanting to know more about the plant, which made sense to us to be the next piece. So how can we find out more about buckthorn, right? I see people asking about its seed dispersal mechanisms, about its roots. So sure enough, we agree. We think that next, we probably would want to learn more about the plant. And to learn more about the plant, we probably want to look at it up close. So we can get, even virtually, we can definitely get some high quality pictures to study and examine. So we might observe the plant up close. So I'll ask you to keep your student hat on. You can tell me something you notice about buckthorn in the chat if you want. We might use these high quality photos with students to make a scientific drawing. So making a realistic depiction of what they actually notice and what they truly observe, making that kind of observation. So not an imaginative drawing, but a really detailed scientific drawing. We love scientific drawing at the museum, a great way to really focus our observations. So maybe we need to learn more. Perhaps we could do that by studying it. So maybe we would notice those glossy leaves, or sure enough, those like dark berries. Maybe that has something to do with its seed. So we might start by observing the plant itself. And next, after we got to observe the plant, we think that this is a great place for some initial explanations. And we think that this has such a strong connection to English language arts. So of course we do this kind of explaining in science, but it really is such seamless integration into ELA as well. So now we'd be asking our students what they think, how they think buckthorn got where it is to generate their first explanation, and really signaling to students that these answers, these ideas, all have a place in this kind of science space. So it might sound like, I wonder, or maybe, thus and such. And our teachers can kind of telegraph to students that that's what we want by kind of accepting and acknowledging all of these answers. And we think that some of these discussion protocols and productive science talk can really help students understand how to support their ideas with evidence. And so we can use sentence stems to do that. We can use norms for productive classroom talk to do that. Some of our favorites are things like, can you say more about, and then ask them to reiterate their idea, to explain it in more detail. And some of these norms will be new for students and discussion, but as we continue to practice it and signal to students that explaining our ideas is not, when we're asked or questioned to explain our ideas, that's not an indication that we're wrong. That's how we do good, productive talk. That's how we think about careful ideas. Can be a really powerful tool in our classroom. asking follow-up questions about what makes you say that, asking students to interact with productive talk between one another. So can you reiterate what so-and-so said? Asking students to agree and disagree with one another. Even in the virtual space, we think that student discussion is really important and can be a really good way to practice some of those discussion norms. Another piece that we love to do to help center student discussion in the virtual space is to still use some silent signals in our classroom conversation. So lots of checking in with each other. Maybe we can be using our American Sign Language signal for same, so we can indicate to one another, even non-verbally, when we agree, when we disagree. We can do, check-ins with our thumbs up to thumbs down on a scale. So using lots of those silent signals as a strategy to get lots of student input during this really productive initial explanation phase. So we generate our first explanations. We practice all this productive talk. We might still need to learn more, right? We have our first idea, but we are thinking about layering in this science content in a couple passes. So next, perhaps we want to show our students, or perhaps we want to unpack together where else we see something like this happening. So are there other examples of plants sort of that aren't planted popping up in other places? So maybe this could be another piece of science we could layer in. Let's look for other examples together. So maybe we could use, again, some high quality images where we sort of zoom into example grassy field or prairie. And look over there, when we look closely at this image, we see this small oak sapling growing in the middle of the field. How did that happen? Maybe we could look at a high quality image, another local image. What about when we see a giant milkweed that's growing in front of a building or in someone's garden? How does a milkweed plant get into a flower garden? How do these plants that aren't planted, how do they get where they are? And so we could think about some of these other examples. And maybe that leads us into a new piece of content that maybe there's something happening with our seed dispersal. So maybe we can do some seed investigation as another layer of science content. So maybe we are comparing and contrasting the seeds. So on the left, we see our milkweed seed. In the middle, we see an acorn, an oak tree seed. And on the far right, we see our buckthorn berry. So we could compare the seeds. Are they the same? No, they're quite different. Maybe we can talk about and explain, unpack these examples. Think about how they're similar, how they're different. Maybe we want to compare the buckthorn seed to the other examples that we saw. So maybe the next layer would be to look for some other examples. Maybe that would lead us to a bit of a seed investigation. Next, Anna is going to help us think about how we might use an explanatory model to kind of take our next step.
All right, so just kind of building off of that, we've had a chance to do some thinking about math and ELA, and now we're overlapping ELA and art. So when thinking of explanatory models, I can only see a few of you. I'm going to try to make my screen here a little bit bigger to see who's familiar with explanatory models. You can go ahead and either give a thumbs up if you're on video, or just let us know verbally or in the chat. I know that this was something that was a newer understanding for me a few years ago when thinking about how models don't have to all be 3D. I know it seems like a pretty basic understanding that, of course, we can do models in a lot of different ways, but sometimes it helps for me to just kind of refresh on my own understandings of what I typically might think of as a model, or some other form that students can demonstrate understanding. And so this is one of my personal favorite ways that art and ELA and just demonstrations of understanding can overlap. So when thinking of explanatory models, we could be using pictures, diagrams, arrows, words, boxes. The list kind of goes on. It can involve a lot of creativity where students can really show their process of thinking. And in just a moment, I'll show a specific example of that. And then, of course, there's kind of this iteration piece. So this explanatory model might look one way when you first create it, and then it might iterate as you learn more information. So another point here is that during that iteration process, the questions that you're coming up with might be included in that model. You might have something on the side. So let's take a look on the next slide here. Perfect. So here's an example of thinking with our pencil using the water cycle here to show how that rain and water really is circulating and changing and doing a lot of really dynamic and interesting things, but just with a pencil, right? So you can draw what was happening and better articulate that understanding by overlapping some artistic moments here, maybe the sun, maybe you're elaborating on that a bit more. Maybe it is just as simple as using a pen or a pencil. So there's a lot of possibility in explanatory models. And I think it's a pretty cool way to both articulate what you think is happening and then also developing that understanding as you're actually going through that process. Okay, so taking that one in, great. So when we're thinking about the buckthorn phenomena, do you have any ideas about what more we can learn about this plant? Are there other things that would help us understand a bit more? Feel free to input into the chat. Let's see. Or unmute is fine. We'll give folks a moment. I don't know about you all who are teaching in the virtual setting right now, but the virtual wait time is really interesting, isn't it? I want to be sure I'm giving you enough time to think.
I noticed earlier, maybe as students or even as teachers, we have some ideas about the seed dispersal for buckthorn, or we asked about the root system. We might have some ideas about them now after observing some seeds closely and thinking about other seed dispersal, but I don't think that we know enough yet. We can't be sure that we have all the information we need about. I know those two questions already came up. Maybe we have some more info, but I bet we wouldn't have everything we needed to know. I saw those questions earlier, so I thought I would reiterate them now because I think we probably still don't know everything we'd want to.
Totally. Thanks, Nicole. Okay, well, let's add a little bit more to our puzzle and our understanding of the buckthorn phenomenon. It is a very interesting one. Feel free to go to the next slide, Yukako. Great. So one of the ways I think we can find out a bit more, and this is typically a pretty helpful way, we can learn from an expert, and we can learn from an expert in a lot of different ways, right? We can learn from them by watching a video where they're talking about their field of expertise. We can do this by reading an article. There's a lot of different ways, and I'm sure a lot of them are quite clear to you, but we're gonna take a moment here to use a YouTube video from the Morton Arboretum that will help us gain a little bit more understanding to hopefully answer some of those questions you all were asking.
Is one of those plants that has both male and female trees. So the berries, which are black, are fairly identifying to it, but you won't find them on the male trees. You'll only find them on the female trees. So even if you find one that doesn't have berries, well, you've just found a male common buckthorn. The berries are where it actually gets its scientific name, Rhamnus cathartica or catharsis. The berries have a laxative effect on birds, which is wonderful for the plant. It means that a bird can eat the berries and easily spread them throughout the area, and that's how this plant is often normally spread. The berries themselves are not very good food, and often you'll see the berries still on the tree late in the season, late in the winter, because they're not a favored food, but the birds will eat them and then spread them through a woodland. One other thing that's not really identifying, but it's interesting about common buckthorn is it's one of those plants that's very strongly allelopathic, that puts out poison in its roots, poison in its wood, and you'll find in a stand a buckthorn, not only because of the thick shade, but also because of this toxin that is putting through the soil. Nothing else is growing. That also affects clearly wildflowers, but also small animals, small frogs, snakes, toads that might be living under there but are affected by the poison. So basically, this is one of those plants that practices a lot of chemical warfare against any of its competitors, and comes out ahead because of that. So that's Rhamnus cathartica, common buckthorn.
All right. Whoa. I feel like I always learn a lot from watching videos like that. And this particular expert, I think, did a nice job outlining some more interesting ways and adding to our mystery or our phenomena that we've been exploring. I'll just pause for your teacher hats here and give a little science fun fact. One of our scientists at the Nature Museum, our herpetologist, does a lot of work studying buckthorn and its effect on herps, so things like reptiles, amphibians, critters that were just mentioned in this video. So this research also does connect to our museum in that way, but curious if anything stood out to you. Did anything blow your mind from that video? Or maybe it's just me. I think it's pretty interesting stuff. Feel free to unmute if you'd like to share or add into the chat. We'll go ahead and continue on now that we have some more information to better understand our phenomenon.
Is one of those plants that has the...
Great. So when we're thinking about all these things that we learned, thinking about the puzzle pieces to put them together into a puzzle here, this tying it all together part, we know that synthesizing the knowledge, of course, is one of the most important parts so that we're not left with a lot of loose ends and questions left unanswered. Of course, not every question needs to be answered, but one of the ways that we thought could be effective for demonstration of knowledge for students to share with you as the teacher what they've been learning could be to make an informational poster or brochure, sort of a thing that we've done in a few of our workshops in the brochure sense is to have a little opportunity for like a hashtag or connection to social media. So especially for older students, that can be a nice little add-on to something like a brochure. They could develop a cartoon or a comic strip to show, we have our little example here, the seed dispersal happening there with the birds. And to quote our expert from the video, it kind of has that laxative effect on the birds. And so then on the last cell of that cartoon showing the dispersal. Do you have any other ideas? I'm sure you're all sitting on a lot of great strategies you've been using. Feel free to share. And I know there's been some great thinking that's happening in the chat, so just want to shout that out. Great. Well, we can cruise right along. I look forward to seeing your other reflections in the chat. Okay. And then when we're, again, just thinking about tying this all together, the other layer that I mentioned at the very beginning is to think about the social emotional learning and connections to art. So we offer a lot of creative and artistic opportunities when we allow for students to have some flexibility in thinking about, for example, the buckthorn phenomena. So opening it up pretty open-ended can be interesting and can really yield a lot of student choice in that way. And just bringing it back to the very beginning of our presentation and thinking about our mission, we focus a lot on locally relevant and place-based content. So the hope for that in the SEL lens would be to give students an opportunity to feel really connected to nature by just looking out their window, looking in the sidewalk cracks, things of that nature, if you will. All right. All right, so I think we're good there. Anything else to add with that one, Yukako or Nicole? Awesome.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons we're always so excited to talk about a local phenomenon is that we really think that there's such strong social emotional connections here when we're really talking to our students about something that they can observe. So we're not talking about something that's happening, long ago or far away. We really can be tying some really important conservation and science into the things that are happening right near home. And we think that that place-based connection, it really does, one, it hooks our students with their interests, but two, we think it really does help students develop a strong sense of place when we're talking about the things that are happening near them as important, as meaningful, as genuine science and deserving of our attention and our teaching. And so we think that some of that signaling that happens when we talk about something local is really important for our students to kind of see those things reflected in their own neighborhoods. As you saw on our map, buckthorn really is, it's a very pervasive, it's good at being a plant. And so we really can find it all over. They really can truly observe it in parks and in backyards nearby.
Yeah, that'll be the challenge for you all after tonight's chat to see, especially mentioning the video again, the expert was mentioning that the berries are often left on the trees or the shrubs well in the winter. So it's kind of one of those last pieces of or reminders of summer, I think. So it's kind of an interesting thing to observe long into the winter months. Great. Any other thoughts or suggestions about connecting social emotional learning, art, or any high-level reflection so far?
I saw in the chat this idea that I love about creating some routine for observing. So not just observing one time in the virtual space, but I love that connection of inviting students, again, to really center their observations about the world around them in their classroom space. So that sounds like an idea we would have.
That's great. Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, we can cruise on to the next slide. So we've done some time together for thinking of what student products could be, but also just wanted to zoom us out a step further here and really articulate this key idea of interest-driving achievement. So you can see in our ribbons and a bunch of these different arrows that are all connecting knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors. So to me, this slide really shows the kind of breaking down of SEL, social emotional learning. So if we're able to get some good learning happening, some knowledge building, then hopefully in conjunction with that, we're seeing some skill development. So maybe to use the example that was just shared about building the routines through science journals or having some sort of journal in general, we're able then to practice maybe a scientific drawing every day. So building those close observation skills, building on our art skills, but also focusing into the science content. So maybe if we're thinking of buckthorn, they're first just drawing the leaves. Maybe then on the next day, they're drawing the berries, for example, and then thinking about seed dispersal. So building on all of these different components. Attitudes, of course. So something we think about at our museum is that every attitude towards nature and science doesn't always have to be positive. And that's more than okay that, maybe you got stung by a bee once on a nature walk and now you really don't like bees. That's okay. And so we always want to be sure that we're being respectful of what students and adult learners in the same way are bringing to the table. So just wanted to be sure to bring that up too, that when we're thinking of all of these big picture ideas, sometimes it's okay to have different perspectives and experiences that are helping us understand all of these lenses for interdisciplinary learning. Okay, great. Onward we go. I think I'm going to hand it off to Nicole here.
Yeah, so next we wanted to think a little bit about the sequence sort of at large. So we created this idea, the sequence for all of you, thinking that it would be a good chance for us to kind of showcase some of the ideas that we have around using science. So we often think about this interdisciplinary connections kind of in the opposite direction, I think, where we think about how we can make the connections between English language arts and math with science. So we sort of wanted to, I don't know, maybe it's not really a flip, but we kind of wanted to show sort of flipping that around where the thing that's at the center is the science phenomenon, and we really can be doing these other things together. So we thought of ways to, in the sequence, we thought of ways to unpack the phenomena using some math, like sampling or mapping. We thought about using some productive discussion talk to think about our initial understanding, some connections to English language arts. And then we thought about thinking about more seed dispersal, and then ultimately maybe making kind of a performance task out of our kind of tying it all together idea, where we might use some drawing, we might use some English language arts skills. Wondering if you all would reflect for a moment with us about what sort of that sequence feels like to you. How do you think your students would respond to that type of work? Are there parts that felt like, wow, that would be really successful in my classroom, or, oh, I think that might present a challenge? I know one thing that we were thinking about you all as adult learners. So of course there might be some serious difference in the type of science phenomenon that we want to introduce. But anything else that struck you as interesting, being well suited for your classroom, or tough in the classroom?
I can kick us off too here, Nicole, thinking about specifically the seed dispersal as an example, as one of the ways to unpack this phenomena, and how we've used that in our curriculum for quite young students. So one of our curriculum was for kindergarten through second grade. And so they were able to form an understanding of, birds eating something, pooping it out, and following that as the through line. So that's a younger student understanding, but of course, scaffolding this up all the way to the teens program, where you saw them working on some restoration work and having that conservation and restoration mindset, and developing real world connections where they're actually going out in the field. So just wanted to kind of note some of the ways that this could be scaffolded up or down.
Yeah. I think another piece that we're always thinking about in this new remote teaching space is that I think that some of the classroom norms for sharing and for conversation are really very different. And so making space for setting those norms together, I think, is something we've heard a few times from our teachers, that these things can still happen, but that kind of are how it used to be in the classroom really has to evolve and change to make sure that we have new virtual norms that allow all of our students to participate. That's why we love some of those silent signals and things as well. Great. Up next, we thought we would share a little peek into some teacher voice. So please feel free to continue to sort of reflect on that sequence, sort of what you think that type of work might look like in your classroom. But here's a little bit of info from some of our partner teachers who've worked with us using some of our school partner programs and our Science on the Go program. So getting to work alongside us, where we get to implement directly with their students in the virtual space. So we had a few quotes that we thought really kind of connected some of these interdisciplinary ideas with our science content. So you can see that we got a couple quotes up talking a lot about this importance of observation. So that type of science, this comfort in this discussion, this asking of questions, and that first quote. Of course, I think it's easy for us to see that there can be such good connections to math. So we see that the second one, right? This analyzing and interpreting data. The third, talking more about giving students an opportunity to really share in a variety of ways. So we gave you a couple prompts where students might draw, right? They might draw a scientific drawing, or they might be making a drawn model. We love those drawn models. And I just think it's so great to ask students to gallery. Are you doing this, right? To ask them to gallery their drawings or their student work. So wherever you are in your drawing, everyone puts their drawing up to the screen, and we have a little virtual gallery of our student work. And so, right, that isn't going to feel the same as being able to visit each table group, but another way we can kind of do that in our virtual classroom in that third quote. And then maybe the quote that I love the most, that fourth quote, where we do know and we can recognize that our students they're smart, and when they love the science we're doing, they're going to find and seek out the connections that exist. And so when they see it in a book, or even in a piece of fiction or nonfiction, they might be making these connections to science. So like, oh yeah, that was like what I saw in science. That buckthorn plant looked like that plant we saw in that other book, or that berry looked similar to the buckthorn berry. So knowing that those connections will emerge for our students too, when we're kind of drawing them in and making those connections alongside them in science. So love that last quote. Love to hear students say, like, whatever happened in science. So those were a few pieces of teacher voice that we thought were really illustrative of some of the work that we do and some of the connections that we see and that they see when we're doing these things together. And next, of course, continue to use the chat if you want to share anything else that you noticed about that sequence or other interdisciplinary connections your own students are making when you're doing science in a virtual classroom. But next, of course, because we are talking about lots of remote teaching and learning, we wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of unpacking some of the resources that we have online. So we'll make some connections you'll notice some connections to the types of resources we use, pictures and videos, but Yukaka's gonna let us take a little peek at those.
Awesome, thanks, Nicole. So yeah, I wanted to share and highlight some of the digital museum resources that you can access and incorporate into your virtual classroom or in-person classroom. I'm gonna actually come out of present mode so that we can actually look through a few of these together. But I was gonna go into this actually second one. I'm gonna go out of order first. So I know the slides will be shared with you all later, so hopefully these links will be there. Can everyone see my screen okay still? Screen is okay? Great. So this first link will take you to a page on our museum website. And this is a neat little place to read a little bit about our museum collections. And then if you click on this button for the Google Arts and Culture page, you can actually find some really high quality images of some of our preserved collections. I really love taking a dive into our Google Arts and Culture page just to see what's there. When we're doing in-person programming, we really enjoy engaging our students with a real object, right? Like bringing a preserved squirrel into the classroom. Even though students might see squirrels every day outside, it's just a whole new level of observation and engagement you get. Unfortunately, most of our programming is virtual right now. So using high quality images is a good substitute for having the real object in front of you. So I'm just going to click into one of these. I'll click into the Chicago one. So you'll notice that there are some really high quality images of different preserved specimens. Some of them, we call these bird popsicles or torpedoes sometimes, but they're in a study skin form. You'll notice the other ones are, well, maybe not on this page, other ones might look a little bit more lifelike. They're posed as a display mount. There's also some examples of scientific drawing here. I know Nicole mentioned a little bit about drawing as a way to capture student observations. So we like to show students some examples from our collections as well. Yeah, so the the Google Arts and Culture page is a neat place to find some really neat images. And oftentimes we think a lot about animals, but we also have some herbarium sheets, some plants that students can take a closer look at and observe, also some fossils, so insects, wide variety of things. The second place that I wanted to navigate to is our YouTube page. And fun fact, Nicole, who's with us today, is our resident YouTube star, so you might see her in a bunch of these videos. And there's lots of different kinds of videos here. The playlist feature sometimes can be useful if you're looking for a specific kind of video, but I just wanted to maybe chat through a few different ways that we've been engaging our audience with videos and maybe give some ideas for how they might be useful to you in the classroom. So one of the kinds of videos that you'll find in here are some videos of our animals from our living collections at the museum, whether that's a feeding or other kind of behaviors that you can have your students watch and observe. Sometimes I ask, or I will play the video without sound to get rid of the narration that's happening and really ask students to just use their eyes to make observations. And it's a really great way to layer on top of an image. Images are still, but then in video, students can really start to notice how the animal is using different structures for particular functions. And then without the audio, they really get to use their observations to start explaining what's happening. And of course, right, you can always rewatch the video with the audio and you'll hear one of our museum scientists talking a little bit about the animal and what's going on in that video. There's also some videos here really highlighting some of our scientists' work, whether that's hearing from our herpetologists about their conservation work. So you can find videos like that here as well, which is really neat, an opportunity for students to hear from a scientist doing work in the field. You can also learn more about our collections through these videos. This is Dawn here and talking a little bit about all the neat things that are in our preserved collections. Another group of videos that I think I find that might tie into something we talked about today is when we were talking a little bit about plant biodiversity. There's some activities that are highlighted in some of these videos. For example, like plant pressing, where the video will talk students and families through this activity. And that can be kind of a neat extension or a tie-in to students noticing the biodiversity of plants in their neighborhood. So again, making that connection to local nature that you can find all around you. There's also lots of ways to explore the museum virtually. You'll notice that a lot of these videos are centered either inside the museum building or on the grounds, which is neat, with some of our scientists giving tours and pointing out different plants and things like that that you can see in the outdoor space at the Nature Museum. Awesome. And if any ideas come to mind about ways that you're interested in using these videos, feel free to add them in the chat. I'm sure that everyone here would be interested to hear new and different ideas about how these videos might be useful to you in the classroom or to share with your students. Awesome. We also have a sort of repository of many of our online resources at this shortcut URL, naturemuseum.org/online-resources. And this has a lot of different kinds of resources. So I'll just chat through a couple of them without going into them, the actual links specifically. But here you'll find different like newsletters and things like that that have gone out in the past. They're all sort of stored here. And you can find some thematically organized newsletters that might either spark an idea for some kind of investigation you're hoping to do in your classroom, or with to share with your students and families as a way for them to connect what they're learning in the classroom to something that they can do at home. I know that in the past, some of our newsletters have highlighted some of those routines and strategies that families can implement at home, whether that's like a notice and wonder board or doing scientific drawings, journaling, things like that. So you can find a lot of those different strategies and ideas in this online resources repository here. There's also some activity guides that go along with some of the YouTube videos that you can find in there. So I really encourage everyone to, if they have a moment, to navigate to this website and click around and look for what sparks some interest or new ideas about the kinds of things that you want to share with your students and families. Awesome. And then I know that there was a question that was submitted before the chat about virtual field trips. So I wanted to share a little bit about the virtual field trips that we're currently offering. So the easiest way to get to our website is to type in this shortened URL, naturemuseum.org/school workshops. And I'll actually go there right now so we can take a peek at what it looks like. This is our landing page for school-based groups to learn more about our virtual field trips and register for workshops. But just to give you an overview, we are offering virtual field trips. We have 12 different virtual workshops that we have developed, and they're broken up into grade band, and we have 3 offerings per grade band. We have a pre-K and K grade band, 1st and 2nd grade, 3rd through 5th grade, and then sort of our middle school and high school workshops. And there's 3 at each grade band. And each of these workshops is a virtual, live, interactive workshop that's led by one of our museum educators. And they all center around local natural phenomena, which is neat, hoping that students make those connections to the nature that's all around them. We also highlight many of our unique museum specimens to foster those real world student-driven learning experiences. So this is a website where you can find more information and learn a little bit about the workshops. You can read a little description for each one, and all the registration information is on this website as well. Awesome. I'll go back into present mode for a moment. So those are our school workshops. Our virtual field trips with student workshops, and the offerings are also highlighted on this page with a little diagram. And if you were interested in a more extended programming option, we are still running our remote science on the go, which is a different program model that's a 5-lesson remote ready curriculum, along with teacher professional development and a museum educator-led lesson. So you'll get some classroom modeling in your classroom by a museum educator. And currently these are the 6 different curricula that we're offering. We have 2 in each of our 3 grade bands. So 2 for K2, 2 for 3-5, and then 2 curricula for our middle school curricula. Awesome. And I know that I'm not doing a good job of looking at the chat, but I think I'll come out of present mode. And if there's any questions, feel free to add them in the chat or unmute, and we're happy to answer any and all questions.
And just really quick, to build on what you were just sharing, Yukako, about our different program offerings and the virtual field trips with the student workshops. I am pretty proud of the work that we get to do with those, because we do get to directly interact with your students during those. So we have the preset curriculum, but it's not like it's just shared and then that's kind of it. It's not just a pre-recorded thing. We actually get to interact with you and your students. And so I think that's kind of a cool bonus of taking one of those. Awesome. Thanks for sticking with us after school on a Wednesday. Are there any other thoughts or questions that are coming up?
I think you were so thorough that everyone's just like processing, and this was really, really cool. You are so incredibly passionate, clearly love the work, and I just think it's so great. I have little guys, like very little guys, but my 6-year-old would think some of this stuff is so super cool. I need to tell him all about the buckthorn plant. He's just gonna so, it's great. Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for coming. Do the 3 of you have anything else you want to share? Any plugs you want to give to your programming right now?
I think that was mostly it from us tonight. Nicole or Yukako? Awesome.
Good.
We're good.
Awesome. Good. Good. Well, thank you all so much for coming. We are, again, just, so thankful that you chose to spend some of your day today with us. Again, we know today especially was a busy day for a lot of our elementary school teachers, and this has just been quite a few challenging and emotionally taxing weeks, I'm sure, and months. And so we just hope that you know that CFE as an organization is here for you. If there's anything you'd like to hear in a chat, if there's a presenter you've seen, if there's a topic you'd like to see explored, again, this is our 15th since April. So we've done them all across the board. So some are content-based like this one, and others are, have been around self-care. We've done a couple just a little bit broader and less sort of content focused. So we're open to anything. So if anyone has any ideas, certainly send them our way. We are, again, just so incredibly thankful for everything you've done for the past several months and everything you've done before and will continue to do in the coming weeks and months. We are here for you. Let us know if there's anything we can do to further support you. We hope you enjoy your evenings and your holidays. We don't have another chat until December 1st, which is, it's called The Hallmarks of Online Teaching, and it's being led by a PhD who runs an online school called Enact Academy. And he is sort of working through some tips and tricks around online learning, and he has some cool stuff to share. So hopefully you can join us on December 1st. And in the meantime, let us know if you need anything. And to our 3 presenters, thank you so much for being here and preparing this wonderful session for us. Notebaert is doing their 3rd session of the 3-part series will be on January 20th. So we hope that you'll all join us for that as well. So if there's nothing else, we hope you have great nights and great weeks, and we will chat with you soon. Bye.